You probably heard something along the lines of Islam is violent and evil, whilst also hearing the oft-repeated question, why don't Muslims condemn terrorism? Usually from conservatives, so we'll just cue that.
Do you think Islam is at war with the West?
I think Islam hates us. There's something there there's a tremendous hatred there. There's a tremendous hatred. We have to get to the bottom of it. There is an unbelievable hatred of us.
In Islam itself?
You're going to have to figure that out.
We always hear about the radical Islamists, and I do believe that the rise of radical Islam is a clear and present danger to the world. Then we've got moderate Muslims, too many of which, I want to ask you both, in my view, are silent.
What we need to do, I think, is encourage the imams and the clerics to come out and condemn the radical elements of that faith.
There is a sickness within Islam.
Okay, go to any mosque or Islamic school in the United States. Ask any Muslim organization in the United States. Ask them this. What kind of program do you have to teach young Muslims that the understanding of Islam represented by the Islamic State, which you condemn, is wrong? There is no such program anywhere. Anywhere.
So for all our powers of reasons and us talking about moderate and peaceful Muslims, I'm glad you're here. But where are the others speaking out?
The fact is that I've always said there are a lot of moderate Muslims. They're just pretty silent these days.
So you get nice middle to upper class Muslims from nice families who are westernized and assimilated, and they're your friends. And you think, gosh, these people are saying such terrible things about Muslims, but I know so many nice Muslims, that can't be true. Well, it's because of where you are in the world, right? So you have those nice middle and upper class Muslims, and you have terrorists. That's all you have here.
If Islam is a religion of peace, why is there no popular Muslim peace movement?
Now to the viewers, you want us to fight globalism? The sword of the New World Order is Islam. You want us to stand up for freedom? You want us to promote sovereignty? We're doing it. And I'm very honored to be under attack by all these people. But I'm here to tell you, if you want to support the broadcast, go to InfoWarsStore.com and buy those products.
Sometimes even those who identify themselves with the left take a similar tone, so second incoming montage now.
Would you come to this table and have a debate about this with a moderate Muslim?
Find one, yes. Find one.
I promise you I'll find one.
Find a Muslim.
I do believe that what we see with ISIS is not representative of...
As I said, connecting tissue.
It's not representative of the Islamic religion. Again, I don't think the Quran teaches them to do this kind of thing.
Well, you're wrong about that. The Quran absolutely has on every page stuff that's horrible about how the infidel should be treated.
The promise of a martyr's heaven, which is... We cannot deny that this is part of Islamic doctrine. Martyrs go straight to paradise.
Yes, but not terrorists, not murderers, not criminals.
Well, they believe that because they're told it by their imams.
But then what about the majority of the world's Muslim clerics and ulama who came out and condemned 9/11 straight
Well, I'm
afterwards?
delighted they did, but they were pretty quiet about it.
Osama bin Laden is not the Reverend Jim Jones of the Muslim world. It would be wonderful if he were, but the problem is he is giving a truly straightforward version of Islam, and you really have to be an acrobat to figure out how he's distorting the faith. Now, if these guys were Jains, or Buddhists, or Amish, or Quakers, it would be patently obvious how they were distorting their religion. I mean, in fact, their behavior would be unintelligible. Okay? It is not obvious by the light of Islam, and this is just a fact we have to speak honestly about. And no one should be speaking more honestly about this and more volubly about this than moderate Muslims. Moderate Muslims have to find some way to grapple with this fact.
So yeah, there's a lot of negative sentiments out there, clearly. And if you look at recent political developments, whether it be the election of Trump, Brexit, or the rise of populism and identitarianism in the West in general, it's not really possible to deny that Islam and accompanying concerns over national security are often at the center of attention. We're often reminded of the dangers of Islamic doctrine by a kind of rogues gallery of commentators and vloggers, many of whom are eager to paint Muslims as alien to Western societies containing more terrorist sympathizers than is often acknowledged. These efforts are the result of either willful ignorance or blatant propaganda, and have clearly gained some degree of traction. For example, according to a Chatham House study about European public opinion on Muslim immigration, majorities in all but 2 of the countries polled voiced support for a permanent halt. The study notes that recent terror attacks and fears of terrorists posing as refugees likely explain these figures, whilst also noting the prominence of far-right groups, quote, looking to mobilize this angst over Islam into the ballot box. Of course, this study occurred in the context of debates surrounding the real travel ban proposed by Donald Trump. The Chatham House study also links to research previously conducted by the Pew Research Center in 2016, and those results weren't particularly encouraging either. So, not too much love for Muslims, and due in no small part to the notion that they simply don't condemn terrorism enough, and that condemnations are so sparse precisely because violence is inherent to Islamic teachings. So that seems to be that. Islam is the problem, except that this is wrong. In fact, there's something of an untold story when it comes to Muslims opposing terrorism, not just because it's trendy and appeasing to wider society, but rather because Islamic teachings, as expressed by scores of Muslim scholars, opposes it. But these voices are often drowned out by the kind of rhetoric at the beginning of this video, which means a lack of coverage. For example, research from Media Matters found that, following the Orlando shooting, hardly any Muslim guests were featured to discuss the attack. So there we are, we have a predictably low figure of 5% in the case of Fox News, but MSNBC and CNN didn't leave me very impressed either. This problem is compounded by the fact that, in place of educated academic voices, the public is often exposed to quote-unquote terrorism experts and journalistic opinion, much of which presents a crude picture whilst often seeking to monetize the subject. In his book, The Far Enemy, scholar Fawaz Gerges puts it as follows. On the whole, scholars of the Middle East relinquish the field to security consultants and journalists who now possess a monopoly over the quote-unquote science of terrorism, and a cottage industry, to cite Capel, a French scholar of Islam, worth billions of dollars. These consultants and journalists are now considered the experts on terrorism. Academics who feel that the subject is too contemporaneous and contentious to merit scholarly investigation have kept their distance. So, between the terror attacks, anti-Islam rhetoric, and media ineptitude, it's little wonder why Muslim voices opposing terrorism remain largely unknown in the public sphere. Even so, these Muslims still try to make themselves heard, and I may as well do my bit to help them along. So, what follows is a brief, although much needed history of Muslim opposition toward terrorism, beginning with the pre-9/11 era. Here we go. So I'll begin with Egypt during the 70s, when student groups on university campuses were among the first militants to advocate the violent establishment of an Islamic state via what they claimed to be jihad. Chief among these were Al-Ghama Islamiyya, or in English, the Islamic Group, or IG, and also Islamic Jihad. These groups acquired a kind of manifesto in the form of Al-Farida al-Ghaiba, or the Neglected Obligation, written not by a Muslim scholar, but rather the electrical engineer Abdus-Salam Faraj, who assembled the various existing militant groups to form the umbrella organization Tanzim al-Jihad, or Jihad Incorporated. So this group would go on to assassinate then-President Anwar Sadat in 1981, and conduct a string of attacks against the Egyptian state. This marked the beginning of a bloody standoff, which lasted into the 1990s, claiming thousands of lives. However, a clear stalemate after years of bloodshed combined with the torture of thousands of captured militants in Egyptian prisons prompted doubts about the viability of violence as a political method. Even more importantly, the Egyptian state, as a matter of self-interest, made sure to supply an array of Islamic scholarly works to imprisoned militants, including standard reference works on Islamic law. Most militants were, in fact, unlearned from an Islamic perspective, which scholars Lisa Blaydes and Lawrence Rubin found, in their words, to be, quote, quite ironic, given their deep level of commitment to change based on religious conviction. It was in this context of uncertainty and later re-evaluation that founding members of the IG, referred to as the historical leadership, underwent a significant Islamic paradigm shift, denouncing violence as a means to achieve their objectives. Many of their followers came round to this, and in 1997, this pacified faction launched an important project called the Initiative to Stop the Violence. The best reference work I've read on this subject comes from the Islamic Studies professor Sherman Jackson, entitled Initiative to Stop the Violence, Sadat's Assassins and the Renunciation of Political Violence. So we'll take a look at that. This is a quote from Muhammad Al-Amin, a rank-and-file member of the IG, who introduced the initiative as follows. The historical leadership of Ulama Islamiyya calls upon their brethren from among the leadership and the rank-and-file to terminate without stipulation and with no prerequisites all armed campaigns and all communiques that call for such, both inside and outside of Egypt, in the interest of Islam and the Muslims. So the historical leadership was comprised of 8 men, all IG veterans, who had been on the consultative council of the IG in the days of Abd Salam Faraj, so the early days basically, and thereby possessed a great degree of credibility among the rank and file. Now, I wouldn't claim that they were able to convince everyone with ease, they didn't. Attacks were still being conducted, of course, and certain stalwarts refused to change their ways. However, the initiative did manage to spark a significant debate. It's worth considering Jackson's take on the motivations of the historical leaders when proceeding with the initiative. Jackson notes that scholars give 3 different reasons as to why they decided to change. Number 1, a deal with the state. Number 2, giving in to state pressure. Or number 3, making a re-evaluation based on reference to Islam. Jackson believes all of these were relevant and impacted their decision. He appears to accept the idea that Islam itself was the main factor, given the historical leaders always denying giving in to state pressure, as well as reports from detainees that they proposed the idea to the state first. Most importantly, they made repeated references to Islamic concepts within their work. As Jackson puts it, the Gamal leadership thoroughly familiarized themselves with the classical discourse on Sharia, not to mention an interesting array of modern Western works. Indeed, they limit themselves neither to a particular school of thought, madhab, nor a particular era. Rather, the entire tradition presents itself as a cornucopia of sorts, from which they draw views in support of their new perspective. So thereafter, the historical leadership would go on to release 4 booklets, which sought to refute the violence they once advocated. Whilst only some of the rank and file within the IG agreed with the historical leadership initially, this would change following 9/11. The Soviet Union also invaded Afghanistan, leading to the emergence of the Mujahideen with the support of Pakistani intelligence and eventually with backing from the CIA, and to Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. Initially, bin Laden was on cordial terms with Saudi scholars until the Gulf War in 1990, when the Saudi government allowed American troops on its soil to fight Saddam Hussein. Thereafter, bin Laden broke ties with bin Baz and all scholars associated with any Muslim regime, all of which he condemned as pro-American and tyrannical. Throughout the 90s came a string of Al-Qaeda-related attacks, including the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and the US Embassy bombings in Tanzania and Kenya. all of this serving as a prelude to 9/11 and the War on Terror, bringing us to part 2. If you like this video, then please check out my Patreon page, where, for $1, you can help to make future videos possible. Ideally, I'd like to work on this channel full time, so any support would be appreciated. Please click the bell to get notified about new videos, and also to like and subscribe. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.